Hello. Good day, evening, afternoon, night, whatever um, time of day it is where you are located. I hope you are doing well in this new year, I suppose. Part of me still never really can accept the year being, 2023. It's hard for me to really except that it's not like 2005 anymore. I don't know why my brain is like part of my brain seems to be stuck in 2005 or something. Anyway, I wanted to talk about some dark things, quote unquote dark. Apparently, it's become like a political correctness issue now, using the term dark, which to some extent I can understand because it can be associated with like skin tones and negativity, using dark to describe something that's negative or whatever, um, can has been used to uh, you know to have like a negative association with dark skin. But at the same time, I don't take words too seriously. I think there's more important things than words and connotations, in my opinion. So and also, it's a matter of like, what is bad and what is negative, and that's kind of what I want to explore here. So I uh, as far as like embracing the shadow, that refers to the shadow self. If you've heard of the psychiatrist Carl Jung, that was his, one of the theories he's like well known for is the concept of people having a shadow, which essentially is, um, parts of a person's psyche that they kind of suppress because it contains, you know, qualities that society might consider negative, or that the individual might consider negative or whatever, or bad, basically. And so people kind of suppress it. But I find the concept that he puts forth, which is basically just trying to integrate that rather than suppressing it. I found that really useful, and I was listening to some of Kate Godina's videos, and she mentioned recently, um, like the conflict between wanting to be, basically like a nice person, or being kind towards people, and at the same time having like a cynical side. And I had commented at the time that like I don't think it's necessarily contradictory to feel like, to feel you have both of those characteristics within yourself. And I think that's what the whole shadow concept really gets to the root of, because yeah, I don't think there's anything, yeah, weird about that at all. And I think most people have that within them, whether they recognize it or not, and that's kind of the issue. And I find it more useful to like really be aware of it, and recognize what's going on, than to suppress it. And that's what I've done over time. I also wanted to like touch on, yeah, I mean, also the concept of like feeling guilt or feeling shame about like not knowing certain things, like in, quote unquote waking up to certain things, feeling guilt and shame. And I was thinking that I can really relate to that because I felt like a lot of shame for a long time, and a lot of guilt. I was raised Catholic, so if anyone has familiarity with like Catholicism, it's supposedly known for guilt and stuff like that, with respect to various aspects of life. And I think, yeah, a lot of religion can be like that, and that's kind of a downside um, to organized religions, is that it kind of comes on with a really, um, you know, moralizing attitude, and that's part of what I want to get into later also. But as far as yeah, feeling guilt, like I mentioned, a couple videos ago, I did talk a little bit about going from, this really empathic kind of personality to going to trying to like work on that and not be, to the point where I was like self sacrificing or something like that, where I was really idealistic when I was younger, and I really believed in all these different causes, and trying to help people all the time and save people, and save humanity or whatever. Um, and yeah, this is kind of like expanding on those concepts, because I really feel I have changed a lot, like going from a really almost, yeah, self-sacrificing mentality to self-command, which I mentioned in the title. And this is kind of exploring, the concepts and things that helped me kind of evolve in that way. And I think a lot of it is sometimes not talked about as much as the altruism stuff. And I guess it's kind of what I want to get at here, is that it's not necessarily bad to have a lot of these characteristics, whether it's like the egoism, which I'll get into, or caring about yourself, or being willing to prioritize yourself and your own thoughts and beliefs, and all of that stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, I really went through a lot of time where I was kind of self-hating, basically, like even beyond just like being super altruistic or whatever. I remember um, kind of just having a really low value of myself, and it was strange, because I remember um, having so much compassion for other people. Like I mentioned, empathy, being an empath. Like I felt so much empathy for other people, but I never extended that to myself when I was younger, and it was really um, a difficult time. I was really depressed and all of that stuff, and going through a lot of just self uh, hatred, and kind of like an inferiority complex. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what terms you want to use to describe that, but yeah, I really didn't treat myself very well, and it was easier for me to show understanding and compassion towards other people than to myself. And it took me, a few years to, you know, or more than a few years, maybe like a decade, to really work through of all of that, and come to a place where I am now, where I really don't, have a lot of those issues, like with depression, with self hatred, self deprecation, or feeling inferior, feeling like I don't deserve to assert myself, or whatever, whatever ways you want to use to describe that. Um, and in fact, I mean, it's a matter of perspective, but of course, like I have the word egoism in the title, and egoism is seen as a negative thing, kind of with in the vein of like words like narcissism or selfish or whatever. And you know, I mean, I've kind of harnessed those concepts in a way that has helped me get out of like kind of the self-hating, you know, self-sacrificing mentality. And I don't think those things need to be seen as all negative or what have you. So yeah, I mean, when I started to really like look into the shadow concept, and look within myself and see like what do I really feel about certain things, and be honest about that, and not suppress it out of that need to be live up to a certain ideal, to feel like I have to be kind and generous all the time. I really found that I do have a lot of like opinions or beliefs or whatever that that are seen as like negative, that a lot of people would suppress or people would say are bad. And, you know, I basically just kind of sat with them, like recognized those aspects, and yeah, allowed myself to realize them without feeling guilty, without feeling ashamed, because as time went on, and I also learned a lot about other people, as I was going around being this empath and all of that, and I did spend a lot of time just really observing people and how people act, and um, over time I realized that there's no reason to really feel guilty, because yeah, I mean, people go through a lot of things, they change, they make mistakes, they make bad decisions and all of that stuff, and there's no reason to hold myself to like some unobtainable standard, like above and beyond everyone else or whatever, and feel like I couldn't ever make a mistake, or I couldn't even just express things that are seen as mean or as negative. And as that went on, like I really was able to let go of like the guilt with that, and really integrate you know different aspects of my psyche, and not judge them really, because yeah, I don't find it useful to just judge, especially just my own thoughts or whatever, and always say like, that's bad, that's mean, I shouldn't think that, I shouldn't feel that, things like that. I just find it pretty unhelpful, and I guess that's kind of what the Jungian, the Carl Jung's theory gets at, is like, you know, um, there's not a ton of use in suppressing all of that all the time. And let's see, but yeah, I mean, and this ties into egoism, because uh, well, I'm going to like read some about that, but just to introduce egoism, like again, I came from a background where I felt like I had to measure myself against these against certain standards, basically like morality and stuff like that. And so egoism is a concept that was written about, I guess, is by well written about by Max Stirner. I guess it's mostly attributed to him, and I'm sure there's other people who've written about it. But he was a philosopher in the 1800s, and he wrote some books, and I'm going to read some excerpts from one of his books here in a second. But really, when I discovered his philosophy, it really helped me, also let go of like just extreme self-critical uh, attitude that I had. Like I said, just really like being so critical of myself to where I, you know, almost valued other people even more than myself. And what I got out of his philosophy is that um, ultimately most people really do act. They do what they want to do, I guess, is an easy way to put it. And I want to distinguish that from necessarily like the concept of like people being inherently selfish or self-serving. I don't think it's necessarily the same as that, because you don't. It's not that people have to be selfish. It's that whatever things they choose to do, they're not really due to adherence to like a what he calls like an alien like fixed idea, like a moral, fixed moral code. It does come from the person themselves. That's mainly his argument. And so at the end of the day, like there's no reason to like beat myself up over not measuring up to certain ideals, because frankly, like most people don't, even if they think they do, live based on like these fixed moral ideals, and that's what really helped me kind of like unravel that extreme self-deprecating position, um, a lot. So I'll actually play like a pretty short clip here about Carl Jung, and then I'll read some about egoism. So let me try to set that up now. Let's see. All right.
Generate happiness or weakness. Another potential benefit of Sith philosophy is that it can lead us to our darker unwanted characteristics, which we could use, and thus create a more whole, rounded personality by developing our dark side instead of repressing it. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow, psychiatrist Carl Jung once stated. The more one tries to be good, the more he suppresses his darker qualities. But as a consequence, we fail to, as Dark Revan put it, express those values that we would disavow in the light. Jung believed that we need to explore the dark side of our psyche, as it contains personality traits and qualities that can enrich us if we integrate them. Disparaged features like pride, selfishness, self-admiration, or boldness could be used to improve one's position, exude strength, and simply feel good. It could help us discover our inner Dionysian and break free from slave morality, eventually developing our dark side, or in other words, integrating dark side characteristics may strengthen our position in the material world and lead to worldly success.
So yeah, I mean that was a short excerpt from a pretty good video. I have this video linked in the description. This person actually uses like Star Wars as an example to explore kind of like the concept of both like the shadow, but also more of like Nietzsche's philosophy, which I talked about a couple of videos ago. And he talks more about like morality, the concept of like the master-slave morality that Nietzsche has. Um, and I recommend that if you're interested in hearing more about that. I'm not even like really into the Star Wars stuff myself, but it's a good like metaphor for the concepts, because it is about like, again, like the the perceived, good and bad, and what all of that means, morality, living up to certain codes, and altruism, and versus, what's seen as bad, being selfish, being whatever, using violence. Yeah, I think it's a good video, good explanation. And yeah, I would say that, yeah, I mean, really, a lot of uh, I think a lot of people, do want to believe that, yeah, that they're all good, right? Because there is like a bias there. Like, who wants to say like, yeah, I have these like uh, vices, right? Like in Christianity, there's virtues and vices. Who wants to say like, oh, I have a vice or a sin or whatever, right? And people, do want to see themselves as all good, but realistically, I don't think that's true. And so it's like there becomes this hypocrisy, in my opinion, that pervades society, because people don't want to be honest about, having those negative, so-called negative characteristics, um, and just suppressing them, and trying to act like they're above them, when really they do seem to, be as present as any other kind of characteristic uh, in society, or in, an individual. And yeah, I think, yeah, it's hard. It's a hard balance. Like, getting back to what Kate had been talking about, like trying to find strike a balance between those things, and like the duality of like of the symbol right here, right, the yin yang symbol, that, within darkness there's light, within light there's darkness, and they do both kind of go together. And so again, it makes sense that you can't just be all, quote unquote light, all good all the time, and that there always is like complementary aspect to that, whether people acknowledge it or not. Um, and yeah, I mean, for myself, like, I've found it really just helpful to acknowledge that and to stop feeling like I have to be all one thing all the time. And, yeah, I mean, basically to admit to myself that I don't find, the so-called virtues useful in every context. I mean, and that in certain contexts, characteristics, geez, I can't say that word, uh, yeah, qualities that are seen as negative or bad that, that society would like to tell people not to express, basically, can be helpful. And I think in the second part of that video, um, he does talk about like the master slave uh, concept from Nietzsche, where he talks about, like, the reason it's called that is that uh, slave morality is basically used to keep people in line, and I think I talked about that before too. And so, as I, considered all these concepts, like, I do wonder, yeah, I mean, are these virtues really, pushed onto people so much in society because it keeps people kind of stuck in their positions, being dominated by people who, we should all know by now, really don't adhere to those same, yeah, fixed ideals or morals or whatever you want to call them. Um, and that there is a lot of, like, self actualization to be had. Like, if one does explore the things that we're told not to, whether, like was mentioned in that video, pride or selfishness or egoism or whatever. Um, and at the end of the day, I guess it does come down to, to beliefs. I've like been through a lot of different beliefs about religion and all of that. I'm planning to like make another video talking more about that, but in a nutshell, like, I was raised to believe in, like, in God and stuff like that. And I went through different phases. I went through phases where I was like super anti religion, but now I've like mellowed out to where I'm not. I don't like, I don't find it useful to uh, make fun of religion or even to see it as like necessarily negative or bad or whatever. I'm pretty like neutral towards it. I understand why a lot of people are religious or they believe in God or whatever. But after kind of giving it a second look, like, I would say I went through phases where I did kind of look again at Christianity or whatever, different things, like, around um, believing in, like, I guess that specific kind of God, like the what people call like a creator God or what have you, like or a personal God or things like that. And I would say overall, I'm personally not like super convinced of that, and so I guess that does shape my views on morality and the stuff I'm going to get into in a minute here with egoism and Max Stirner. So yeah, I mean, if a person, if they believe in a God, they're more likely to believe in like a transcendent morality, like essentially meaning like objective morality and stuff like that. And to be honest, I don't believe in like objective morality. Um, and so like my view of morality is kind of similar to my view on religion, which is just that I understand why people believe in it. Um, I think it has its purpose and all of that, as far as like human psychology and just human behavior goes. But at the same time, I'm not convinced, of like what I guess what a lot of religious people would assert is like just a true objective morality, just like they might believe in a true objective religion, or the one true God or whatever. And so yeah, I mean my views on all of that are based on around that, just to give that perspective. um, and I don't to say that I don't believe in objective morality, like, just to be clear, like, that doesn't mean that I don't have like my views of uh, to put it like in a simplistic way, like right and wrong, what some people might call ethics or values. I'm not super into like the semantics, but there's like some people do try to make a distinction between like ethics being more about like really considering things and in different contexts, whereas morality is like a set in stone type thing, that's supposed to be completely transcendent regardless of situations or what have you. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I don't have my own views of what I prefer, what I want to do, what I even hold myself to. But the difference that I think Stirner makes is that those things come from myself, right? I'm not claiming to be serving a higher like purpose as far as a fixed morality goes. I'm not claiming it's like, yeah, it's not objective. Um, but yeah, it's coming from me, and I think that's what Stirner talks about. So after all that rambling about Stirner, I guess I will go ahead and let's see. I'll go ahead and read some of his book here. So, uh, The Ego and His Own is a book. It's in You can read it in full on this website. I have the link in the description. It's kind of a lot. I just wanted to pick like a few parts to read because like his writing is kind of hard to parse out if you're not super familiar with it, and also it was translated from German, so that sometimes can make it even more complex and difficult to read in some ways, like just difficult to get where he's coming from. But I want to read a little bit of it just to kind of give more context to this concept, and explain like why I find it appealing, and what I like about it, and how it's affected my perspective on a lot of things. So I can see here, this was written in 1845, and I'll start reading this chapter. It's titled "All Things Are Nothing to Me." What is not supposed to be my concern? First and foremost, the good cause, then God's cause, the cause of mankind, of truth, of freedom, of humanity, of justice. Further, the cause of my people, my prince, my fatherland. Finally, even the cause of mind, and 1,000 other causes. Only my cause is never to be my concern. Shame on the egoist who thinks only of himself. Let us look and see then how they manage their concerns, they for whose cause we are to labor, devote ourselves, and grow enthusiastic. You have much profound information to give about God, and have for thousands of years searched the depths of the Godhead, and looked into its heart, so that you can doubtless tell us how God himself attends to God's cause, which we are called to serve. And you do not conceal the Lord's doings either. Now, what is his cause? Has he, as is demanded of us, made an alien cause, the cause of truth or love, his own? You are shocked by this misunderstanding, and you instruct us that God's cause is indeed the cause of truth and love, but that this cause cannot be called alien to him, because God is himself truth and love. You are shocked by the assumption that God could be like us poor worms in furthering an alien cause as his own. Should God take up the cause of truth if he were not himself truth? He cares only for his cause, but because he is all in all, therefore all is his cause. But we are not all in all, and our cause is altogether little and contemptible. Therefore we must serve a higher cause. Now it is clear, God cares only for what is his, busies himself only with himself, thinks only of himself, and has only himself before his eyes. Woe to all that is not well pleasing to him. He serves no higher person, and satisfies only himself. His cause is a purely egoistic cause. How is it with mankind, whose cause we are to make our own? Is its cause that of another, and does mankind serve a higher cause? No, mankind looks only at itself. Mankind will promote the interests of mankind only. Mankind is its own cause. That it may develop, it causes nations and individuals to wear themselves out in its service, and, when they have accomplished what mankind needs, it throws them on the dung heap of history in gratitude. Is not mankind's cause a purely egoistic cause? I have no need to take up each thing that wants to throw its cause on us, and show that it is occupied only with itself, not with us, only with its good, not with ours. Look at the rest for yourselves. Do truth, freedom, humanity, justice desire anything else than that you grow enthusiastic and serve them? They all have an admirable time of it when they receive zealous homage. Just observe the nation that is defended by devoted patriots. The patriots fall in bloody battle or in the fight with hunger and want. What does the nation care for that? By the manure of their corpses the nation comes to its bloom. The individuals have died for the great cause of the nation, and the nation sends some words of thanks after them, and has the profit of it. I call that a paying kind of egoism. But only look at that sultan who cares so lovingly for his people. Is he not pure unselfishness itself, and does he not hourly sacrifice himself for his people? Oh yes, for his people. Just try it. Show yourself not as his, but as your own. For breaking away from his egoism, you will take a trip to jail. The Sultan has set his cause on nothing but himself. He is to himself all in all. He is to himself the only one, and tolerates nobody who would dare not to be one of his people. And will you not learn by these brilliant examples that the egoist gets on best? I, for my part, take a lesson from them, and propose, instead of further unselfishly serving those great egoists, rather to be the egoist myself. God and mankind have concerned themselves for nothing but themselves. Let me then likewise concern myself for myself, who am equally with God the nothing of all others, who am my all, who am the only one. If mankind, as you affirm, have substance enough in themselves to be all in all to themselves, then I feel that I shall still less lack that, and that I shall have no complaint to make of my emptiness. I am not nothing in the sense of emptiness, but I am the creative nothing, the nothing out of which I myself as creator create everything. Away, then, with every concern that is not altogether my concern. You think at least the good cause must be my concern? What's good, what's bad? Why, I myself am my concern, and I am neither good nor bad. Neither has meaning for me. The divine is God's concern, the human man's. My concern is neither the divine nor the human, not the true, good, just, free, etc., but solely what is mine, and it is not a general one, but is unique, as I am unique. Nothing is more to me than myself. So, um, yeah, so I mean, in that reading, he, is basically saying, um, I live for myself. Like, I'm not going to apologize for saying, yeah, I'm, whatever you want to call it, selfish or whatever. I'm not going to live for someone else's cause, whether it's like the Sultan, like a politician's cause for a country, dying for a country, uh, or dying for, whatever someone claims is like God's will, basically. Um, and yeah, I think, yeah, what he, talks about there, he says like alien. And so, like, his concept of like an alien, um, fixed idea is things like the nation or of God or of a ruler, like that you're made to believe in certain things that are right just because they are. You're supposed to believe that it's good to sacrifice yourself for a country, for the whims of a ruler, like a law, maybe, or just whatever a ruler dictates, or or any anything attributed to God, um, anything like that. Um, and ultimately, he says that why shouldn't I um, say that, yeah, um, I'm my own first concern, basically, rather than all of these other things. They care about themselves. God cares about, his himself. The the Sultan cares about himself. The country cares about itself. But there's like, but I'm supposed to be sacrificing myself for those things, but not for myself, and that's considered bad or selfish, right? Or egotistical, or whatever. And yeah, it's kind of just an expression that, yeah, there's, I'm not going to put anyone above myself in terms of, my interests or whatever. Whatever they are, because like I was saying earlier, it's not even that, like, it's not the same as some of the philosophies out there where people say like, yeah, everyone is trying to become as rich as they can or whatever. It can be anything. It could be being you know like being willing to help other people. That's still egoistic according to Max Stirner's philosophy, just because it's not done out of reverence to an ideal. It's because it's what you want to do, right? And that's what I would say. Like, for myself, like, yeah, I still like helping people when I can, but it's not because I think I'm superior or because I'm virtuous in like in an abstract sense, right? It's something that is originating with me, and it's what I want to do, and I don't claim otherwise. I don't claim that I'm adhering to a God's will or to a law or to anything other than what I want. So, that is a distinction between this necessarily saying that people are inherently trying to just better themselves or trying to just make as much money or whatever. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that. Um, but yeah, his main argument is that people do what they want to do. I mean, I guess that's the easiest way to explain it. Um, and like over time, as I've observed people, like, yeah, I think most people are that way. I don't know um, that I buy the idea that a lot of people are really going around living up to these ideals or being motivated by ideals, whether it's like Christianity or even like a secular humanism or freedom or like any of these concepts. Whatever they do, it's because it's ultimately serving something within themselves. But they a lot of people like to put that window dressing on it, that it is being done in service of a certain ideal, when it's not. Um, And maybe there are some people who do that. I mean, or to some extent, like I'm sure maybe in some um, limited contexts, like of course dying for the country. I mean, of course, there's people who believe they're doing that. They're serving the country, dying for the country. Um, and frankly, yeah, how does that end up? I mean, that's kind of what Sterner's saying a little bit too. Is like, is that even worth it, right? These things that we're taught to believe in. What do you get out of it? You're dead. Well, congratulations, you get a flag draped coffin. You know, um, but for that's kind of your reward for serving this quote unquote higher cause. And that's really what he challenges here too. Um, so yeah, I will. Let's see. There's another couple paragraphs farther down that I'm going to read. Let me just try to find that here. All right. Sacred things exist only for the egoist who does not acknowledge himself, the involuntary egoist. For him who is always looking after his own and yet does not count himself as the highest being, who serves only himself and at the same time always thinks he is serving a higher being, who knows nothing higher than himself and yet is infatuated about something higher. In short, for the egoist who would like not to be an egoist and abases himself, i.e., combats his egoism, but at the same time abases himself only for the sake of being exalted, and therefore of gratifying his egoism, because he would like to cease to be an egoist. He looks about in heaven and earth for higher beings to serve and sacrifice himself to, but however much he shakes and disciplines himself, in the end he does all for his own sake, and the disreputable egoism will not come off him. On this account, I call him the involuntary egoist. So yeah, I mean that basically just says what I was just saying. People like to dress things up in serving a higher cause, but at the end of the day, it is something that they want to do, and so you know, as he calls it, it's still an egoist position. It's just that it's involuntary. And I think this concept, Stirner's concept, is known as conscious egoism because it's not what he's describing here. It's that you, like what was described in the last passage I read, that you just admit it. Basically, you just say, yeah, I'm doing what I want to do. I'm not going to pretend. It's to serve this higher cause, and that's it. And his theory is that pretty much everyone ultimately does that, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. And I find that yeah, I mean, I guess I mostly agree with that. I mean, like I said, I'm not gonna say there's no one, but you know, having observed people, you always hear people say, all these ideals because talk is cheap, right? It's easy to say like I want to be this, I'm a good Christian, I'm a humanist, I believe in freedom, I believe in, whatever. It's easy to say that stuff, but at the end of the day, like, whether they actually follow through with that or not, um, it doesn't seem to have an incredible link to just to saying those words or claiming those higher beliefs. Um, and like I said, I've just seen so much hypocrisy. I mean, think about Christianity, which isn't the first commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," and then look at the U.S. I mean, the U.S. has been involved in like almost nonstop war for the last like I mean, for all of its existence, actually. I mean, since the establishment of the United States, I mean, it's been almost constant war, all kinds of war. I mean, who knows how many millions of people have died at the hands of the U.S. military. Over whether it's like overseas or within the continent, in various ways. We know the people who, according to the stories, if you don't, agree with the history, I guess that's a separate issue, but, the U.S. was established by exterminating people who already lived on the continent. It was colonized and taken over for themselves by people who considered themselves Christian, who supposedly believed in those commandments, thou shalt not kill, but conveniently, they had an excuse. They saw the people, the native indigenous people on this continent as less than human, so somehow that meant it was fine for them to do what they did. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just saying I really don't buy what a lot of people say, and there's a lot of interesting things that I'm just beginning to like get into about like the subconscious, and frankly, like I said, it's easy for people to say, certain things that they believe, things that they, whatever. But there are things like in the subconscious or in, you know, what Jung calls the shadow or whatever that people really end up acting on and not acting according to these virtues and these fixed ideals that you know a lot of institutions in society want to pretend are so what are we're given as the highest you know things, the highest callings, or the best behaviors or whatever. It's like at the end of the day, how much does it matter if people are always if people want to say they measure themselves against those things and they just fail over and over and over. Like I would say, yeah, like the U.S. society as a whole has failed over and over and over. If they want to call themselves a Christian country, I mean, it's a fucking joke. It's a fucking joke. Like, I'm not buying that shit. So, yeah, I mean, to me, like, I find just this concept of, like, conscious egoism just honest. Like I said, I've felt for a long time there is so much just hypocrisy in society. Um, like I said, people always claiming to be this and that, to believe in all these things, and yet the actual observable reality is just so much different. So, like I said, what's the point of beating myself up and holding myself to some standard, that no one else seems to, and like I was saying about, yeah, like feeling guilty, feeling ashamed, like what's the point, um, what's the point of holding oneself to those unattainable standards when a lot of people are like either deliberately or just or not deliberately like dishonest with themselves. Um, I feel like to be honest, I feel like those people out there who do spend like a lot of time, considering like, oh, I want to be a good person, and is this, the right thing? Is this wrong? Is this that? Are people who are, quote unquote good, who really don't have a lot to be, feeling bad about. And that comes back to what to Nietzsche's, master slave thing. It's like it is almost like a self flagellation. Like, the people at the bottom, people who are not in positions of power, are expected to just always feel bad about themselves and feel like they are inferior and they don't deserve certain things and all of that. When, again, uh, the ruling class or whatever you want to call it, people in those positions don't give a shit. They do not care. So, it does lead to kind of this like I said, it's kind of a self defeating position to always feel like you have to be restrained by morality as a as an as an unchanging, fixed concept, like, violence is bad, whatever it is, lying is bad, stealing, all those things. At the end of the day, um, like I said, if you, or like I said myself, if I'm not convinced about like the concept of objective morality, like for example, there being a God that will send people to hell for breaking those commandments, because who the fuck does that leave? Like I just said about the U.S. I mean, damn, like if that shit is real, like who in the U.S. could honestly even um I mean, that's what I'm saying, like who could honestly even say they've kept those virtues perfectly, so um and then there's also, like, of course, people who are just who claim ignorance, essentially, people like with the example of the military. It's like, yeah, people want to say, well, their brain, they were just sold a bill of goods, they were told lies and propaganda, and they believe they were doing the right thing and this and that. Well, I mean, again, it's like, that just shows how useless it is, instead of thinking for oneself, to always let other people tell you what virtues you should hold yourself to. And yeah, I mean, I just don't find it convincing at all. And so yeah, if there's no objective reason to obey those things, then is it as Nietzsche proposes, like just a way to keep people stuck where they are, like basically like uh, a self perpetuating bondage, like a self imposed bondage, slavery, where yeah, we feel like, oh, we can't do things that could be effective because they're wrong, they're immoral, they're this and that, right? Of course, in society and all these stories, we're taught, violence is horrible. If you're gonna protest, it has to be non-violent protest because violence is horrible. And so, yeah, I wanted to mention a book about the concept of nonviolence and how actually nonviolence has really not been as effective as it's made out to be. And to be honest, again, I find that convenient, right? Because there are certain figures in history that were taught in schools, use nonviolence to win, these civil rights and all this shit. Um, and yeah, those things are put on a pedestal, whereas of course, anything violent is demonized and all of that. Um, but so this book, it's called "How Nonviolence Protects the State." Basically, the author, examines like a lot of historical, like events, and how nonviolence has played into it, and that if you look at a lot of things where we're taught, nonviolence won, it's really, that really isn't the whole story. And I have a link in the description to that book. The whole book is actually there. It's also on this site. But yeah, I mean, so I am suspicious about the concept of morality and who it ultimately serves. Because if, you know, people are basically just being taught to obey all of these different, fixed ideas, for the sake of it, because it's, good, quote unquote good. Yeah, who does that serve? And, I mean, and like I said, I understand that it comes down to a lot of just beliefs, like spiritual beliefs, and I'm not even opposed to like certain conceptions of like spirituality. It just, that's a really large I mean, a term that can apply to a lot of things. It's hard to pin that down, but even so, um, even so, like, yeah, even if you want to say, you're spiritual, like for myself, like I do understand like certain spiritual concepts, and I feel like I practice that in certain ways, just in the sense of not being purely materialist, right? That only things that like you can sense with your senses are real, or whatever you want to say. That's, I guess that's one way of looking at spirituality. And so, like, in a lot of ways, I get that, and I kind of practice that myself. Again, not because I think it's like superior, but because it's what I want to do. Like, that's just what comes to me naturally. Is that I'm not into a lot of material type things. But at the same time, there are, and Stirner does talk about this in other parts of his in this book here. If you want to check it out, it's in the description. He talks about how, yeah, we're not all spirit, right? Even if you want to say you're spiritual, you're not all spirit. I mean, at the end of the day, as long as we still have a physical body, I mean, with this stuff going on, who knows how that's going to go. But insofar as we do have a physical self, we do live in a some kind of material world. There are things that are not spiritual, and so again, like, there has to be a balance, right? Because if we're not all spirit, why would we hold ourselves to these concepts that demand you basically you discard like the material realities? And in thinking about this, like, one example I've thought about is like the concept of like self-defense, right, and pacifism, which ties in with like that whole nonviolence thing. So yeah, I mean, there's people who believe that, like, it's wrong to use violence even in self-defense, right? And that's where like a lot of people have, again, like a compromise where they'll say, violence is only okay uh, only okay to use in self-defense. Well, there are people who are completely pacifist who believe that would also be wrong. And so, and they do it again because of this belief in like this fixed concept, morality, or a sacred thing, right? That it would be immoral for them to use violence even in self-defense. And so, like I said, I understand from that spiritual point of view. I can understand why someone would believe that, or why they would even actually put it into practice, like if they actually chose to not even defend themselves, basically. I can understand that. However, as I said, I'm not convinced personally that it's objective, and so if it's not objective, right, that's where I'm coming from. Like, why, the choice is between allowing myself to be hurt by someone or whatever, and if the choice is between that, allowing myself to be injured, or choosing to use violence against that person, you know, I'm willing to choose the option that does have utility in the material world, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, because there is the material and the spiritual, right? Because I can understand the person who believes they're doing what's right spiritually. Like, that's one thing, and that's their choice. But like I said, for myself, I'm not convinced of that to that degree. Um, that I would choose like that spiritual thing. Like I said, maybe if they believe they're going to heaven by making that choice, like, that's not something that I believe in, so I'm not going to choose that. I'm going to choose something that has utility in the material world, versus the complete pacifist who is willing to suffer in the material world, potentially die, like, their body dies, but they believe they'll be rewarded in whatever way they believe in. And that's, I understand that, yeah, there's that choice there, and like I said, that's not something that can be um, you can't like compromise that. Like, there's certain things that can be like, you can split the baby on, you can compromise, But like I said, in that instant, in that particular context, like there is a, you have to choose one or the other. You can't use a little bit of violence or whatever. That's the whole point. Like if they believe in completely being nonviolent, in a pure sense, there's not a little bit. You can't do that a little and still be within that belief. So I guess that's what I'm saying, that there are things that I'm willing to do within the material context, because I'm not convinced of these, like, the objective nature of, like, morality, that I'm going to benefit somehow from choosing something that would be a detriment in the material world. And I guess that is what the book about nonviolence also talks about. Well, I don't think he gets as much into, like, this kind of, like, um, philosophical aspect, but he does talk about, like, the mythology around nonviolence, because there is, does seem to be a lot of people who place more emphasis on that, based on, like, a false understanding of historical events. So yeah, I mean, I would just say, as far as the concept of self-command, like I said, not being afraid to make these decisions, because, as Sterner talks about here, right, the concept of sacred things, you know, um, and at the end of the day, like, uh, yeah, I mean, if I don't believe in things that are sacred in that sense, I'm not going to hold myself to those standards. And what he talks about in other parts, that it's not like, because, using the term sacred kind of will cause people to think of religion, but he talks about how it doesn't have to be just religious concepts, that the concept of, like, a sacred, fixed idea of morality, and all of that has been kind of secularized. Even at the time he was writing this, like in the 1800s, he talks about how, like, oh yeah, you might consider yourself atheist, but you also have these fixed ideas about morality, so it's really not that different. It's just that you appeal to something else. Like, if you're not appealing to God, you're appealing to like humanism, right? That something is bad because it goes against humanity in an abstract way. And Stirner is also critical of that, and like I said, to me, that comes that seems to come to the forefront in things like selfishness, right? Like, we're not supposed to be selfish because of, like, even if you don't believe in God, it's just bad just because, it's somehow it takes away from, quote unquote, humanity as a whole, like he mentions here, you know, and yeah, he really just challenges those concepts of holding something above oneself and saying you're serving that, when, again, like, in my opinion, I don't really know that there's evidence of that. And so, um, like I said, yeah, I am suspicious of whether it is just a plot. Like, is the whole thing the whole concept of morality a plot to keep people, like, in chains, in bondage, in slavery, because all the things that are effective are said to be bad, are said to be immoral. Um, and in the video, the first video I showed, well, the only video I showed tonight, and earlier in that video, he mentions how there is, like, this moral superiority that people who believe in like the concepts of, like, a sacred or objective morality have, and that's something I want to push back on a little bit, because yeah, I honestly don't think there's a reason to say it's inherently better to be to do what Sterner's talking about here, to say, oh, I'm serving morality, I'm serving God. It's a matter of perspective. Obviously, someone who believes in that is going to think that. I'm not here to dissuade someone from that, but I'm also not going to submit myself to it. You know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I care about someone's belief about, objective morality. I think there is a lot of projection from people. It's not enough to say like to say that I do what I want to do because that's just my inclination. It has to be made into a virtue. It has to be made into objective reality, and that's what I really don't agree with. And I think we see that manifest in society a lot. It's like always fighting over what the law should be, what should be considered right or moral or acceptable in society. It's not enough to just for people to do what they believe is right. We always have to have, these a fixed ideal. That's what I'm really not into anymore. And again, it's an interesting balance because yeah, I mean there will be people who there's always people who say like, oh well, if you're saying there's no objective morality, then why don't people do XYZ? It's like, okay, frankly, people are already going to do that. Like I said, I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but like I said, the people who have the most power in society and who end up like in positions of authority over everyone else already do that. um, they don't care. They're not the ones who sit here and you know flagellate themselves over whether they're being properly moral or not. They just don't do that. um, and so to me it's a completely irrelevant thing whether the idea that exploring this philosophy that yeah, people mostly just do what they want to do, and that all these concepts of alien um, fixed ideals, whatever you want to call them, is kind of useless. Like that gives someone permission to do something. It's like they're already gonna do it in all reality. And like I said, viewing it in the context of like people who are in a position of disenfranchisement or whatever you want to call it, you know, that if they were to integrate some of these things, maybe they could improve their circumstances, as was mentioned in that video. That like I said, in the material realm, there probably is utility with that, as opposed to just the again like kind of the feeling of like the moral high road. Like that's a concept that I really let go of. Like I for a while I did really kind of cling to that, but at this point I really am not interested in the moral high road. Like, cause yeah, I hear you hear a lot of these things thrown around like two wrongs don't make a right, or you don't want to become the thing that you're fighting against or that you hate. And like I said, on one hand I understand that, but again, like insofar as certain things do have more utility in the material world, you know, again, like does it really help someone to basically handcuff themselves and say, well, I'm not going to do this because that I'm going to say because I want to believe that's inherently wrong based on whatever concept, ideal concept. And so you take things off the table, and like I said, you're kind of left with not having that option in the material world. And if like I said, it's your choice if you believe you're getting some kind of spiritual reward, as I said. But like I said, for myself, I'm really not interested in that. I really don't. It doesn't have any bearing on my psyche, on my just on my belief system. Like, I don't think I'm getting anything by taking a moral high road just for the sake of it. I am willing to evaluate the circumstances as they are, and not discount anything automatically based on, again, the concept of an objective moral standard. Excuse me. So yeah, um, let's see. Oh yeah, so I mentioned a little bit about um, yeah, like I said, obviously power dynamics, the ruling class, and all of that. And I've mentioned this before briefly as well. The concept of law, which again is one of those abstract alien concepts that we're made to believe in, right? It's above everything, the rule of law, and we're supposed to believe that everyone's equally beholden to the law, which is a fucking joke for anyone who is paying attention. I'm sorry, I don't know who the fuck actually thinks that's true, because if you think that's true, you are not paying attention to reality. So, um, and this is pretty much explained very well and relatively succinctly by Howard Zinn, and I put a link in the description to an essay by Howard Zinn called "The Conspiracy of Law." So if you want to check that out, I highly recommend it. If you're still, um, kind of confused about the concept of what the law really is and who it serves, right? Just like I said about morality, who does that serve? All of these limitations that we're supposed to put on ourselves based on appeals to virtue or whatever. All of these words, virtue, objective morality, just whatever it is. Um, again, the law is another one of those things, and like I said, it's anyone who's paying attention can see how hypocritically that's applied in reality, in practice. Um, is that something that's worth, again, like kind of having this moral superiority, like, oh, I'm following the law, as if that means, I don't know what you think you're getting from it, when realistically, there is going to be a detriment for certain classes of people, most people in society. So, yeah, I definitely recommend that. It's a good explanation. And, yeah, I mean, let's see. I'm trying to see what else I have to say about that. So, yeah, I mean, I do like the concept of, like, conscious egoism. Like I said, I think it's just um yeah, I mean, it's helped me come out of that mentality of, like, just feeling always like I'm not good enough. I mean, it's kind of like that whole Christian, like, born a sinner type thing, right? It's like we're supposed to always be feeling like we're not even worthy to, like, live or whatever, all this that stuff. Um, yeah, and just really coming into oneself, like being willing to say, like, yeah, I'm gonna determine what I believe is right and wrong. I'm not going to allow a church or whoever, anyone else, even a philosopher or anyone, to tell me what I should believe, what I should serve. Um, and to some people, like, that could be seen as, like, seeing yourself as God. Well, I guess it would be seen that way by someone who believes in that people should be subordinate to these concepts, the sacred concepts or whatever. And like I said, I'm just at a point where I don't care. Like, that has lost its, like, hold on me, and I went through, like I said, a lot of change with regard to religious belief. Like I remember when I was like 14 or 15, I went through a process of like losing my belief in God that had been instilled in me from childhood, obviously. And it's not easy, and so yeah, I can understand. You know, these concepts can be difficult for people. Like like I said, and you start saying things like, "Yeah, there's no objective reality." People like to throw out all these things. Um, the scary, whatever, fearful things, when really it's about just acknowledging oneself and being willing to assert oneself, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And depends on a lot of different factors, and that's why it's not helpful, in my opinion, to hold like these fixed ideals. Um, and at the end of the day, I'm not convinced that most people do that anyway, whether they claim to or not, whether they claim to be a Christian and or this and that and the other. Like I'm really not convinced by people, and I have no reason to. I mean, yeah, this is something I've thought about since I was like younger, and going through all of that. Like that, even if there is a God, let's say, whichever God, if there's a God and there is like an objective truth in that way, um, as far as like the religious aspect, like the religious texts or uh, the priests and the pastors and the authority figures, like how can you even know that their interpretations are right? I mean, that's kind of the thing. And when I look at people in general, like I really don't buy that people the way they are can truly tap into something that if there is like a transcendental truth or a sacred truth. I don't know that I trust most people to really even to know what that is, or their interpretation of it, or whatever it is. So I just have no reason to like subordinate myself to someone else's ideas, whatever they claim, wherever they claim they come from. And I guess that's what I mean by self command. Like, I really do take it upon myself to determine, like, my set of beliefs, my ethics, my values. Like I said, it doesn't mean I don't have any. It's just that I don't claim that they're objective. I don't care what other people believe about them. I don't go around trying to tell people they have to do what I do, because I just don't think that's a real thing. I think people are going to do what they want to do and come up with whatever justification they need to, and that seems to be what's happened, you know, in in most of what we supposedly know about human history or whatever. And that really trying to hold oneself to those ideals ends up being just a hindrance, or like a set of handcuffs or whatever, that I am deeply skeptical about, to be honest. And so, yeah, I guess those, yeah, I would probably want to try to dig more into Stirner, because there is a lot there. I tried to keep it pretty brief just to, like, introduce it, but try to get across, like, the main point. Trying to think if there's anything major that I missed I wanted to say here. But yeah, I mean, I guess the last thing I'll say is with regards again uh to balance, right? Um like I said, there is like a bias towards saying, yeah, I'm virtuous and this and that. Um but like I said, like there are things that are effective in the material world, and there's things that aren't. Um, and you could look at it in terms of like the left brain, right brain, or the left brain is called the masculine side, and right is called the feminine side. And so of course we have, there's all, all of these ongoing conversations about masculinity and this and that. Um to me, like, I would say, like, I feel like I do balance those two sides pretty well. Okay, and I would say that I'm pretty sensitive to when people are like too far to one side or the other. Like if people are really far to the left brain, the masculine side, or or really far to the feminine, the right brain side. And so to me, like, a lot of these appeals to, objective morality do seem to be a little far on the right brain side, in my opinion. Obviously, anyone can do whatever they want to do, but for me, like I said, there's utility in a lot of things that are considered bad, and to just always want to be passive and say, like, like all those slogans, violence isn't the answer, two wrongs don't make a right. um, you know I, I find myself less and less convinced by that, because, like I said, at the end of the day, if I'm only left with just like the sense of moral superiority, does that really outweigh, the things that are being lost in the material sense? And so, yeah, and that just depends on all the different contexts that exist. And that's just why, sometimes I do feel that is a little, too far to the right brain for my taste. And like I said, of course, again, that doesn't mean I'm into like the far left brain, which could be characterized as just like um, brutality or Machiavellianism. Not considering anything. And like I said, it's about consideration. And so for me to to completely to take certain things off the table completely is not balanced. Like, it's not. Yeah, it's not. You're not considering it because you're completely discounting it. If you're saying something is immoral, is objectively wrong, you're already kind of you're handicapping yourself in that sense. And so that's why I'm really not convinced by that anymore. For whatever the consequence is. And so, yeah, with that, I think I've rambled long enough. But yeah, let me know if anyone has any questions about that. If anything was like confusing, let me know, please. That would be, that would be welcome. There's just a lot more I could get into with this, but I wanted to just try and open that conversation. Like I said, it does sometimes get a bad rap. The image of like being egoistic, being willing to assert yourself over other people's opinions or all of these moral values or whatever, can have a negative rap. And I just want to like try and dispel that a little bit. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot more that could be dug into. And yeah, with that, I'll go ahead and end it here. And thanks for listening. Have a good one.